Well, welcome everybody. We have got a great episode today, and we are so excited to have Kurt Larson join the Built to Win podcast. And for many of you that are following us, the Built to Win podcast is about sales, marketing, and faith, and building a life of purpose. And we're getting off the railroad tracks just a little bit today because Kurt is a professional EOS implementer. And we are so excited to have him because he has got such a fantastic background. He has sat in the COO chair. He's been a CFO. He's been a CEO. So we've got a really talented individual with us today. And I'm joined by my business partner, Brent Killen, of over 30 years. And we're just excited to have you, Kurt. And welcome to another episode of Built to Win.
Well, thank you guys. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for that gracious introduction. Hopefully I can live up to part of that. But super happy to be here, my first podcast. So let's get after it.
Well, let's do it. Well, welcome. And I'll jump in right away. And, why don't you just walk us through a little bit of your career, kind of where you came from, and a little bit of the evolution.
Sure. Well, I started out wanting to become a CPA. I had an older brother, older sister that were CPA. So I started down that path, graduated with my degree in accounting from St. Thomas, sat for the CPA exam, passed that, and went to work at a company called Ernst & Young. So I started along kind of the finance accounting path, and I worked in accounting or finance positions for roughly my first 10 years of my career. The last position I held was director of finance at a company called SmartCart. And for those of you who've ever seen the luggage carts in the airports, that's the largest line of business is SmartCart. And was right up to about 9/11. I was running the finance department for the business, and then 9/11 happened, which was obviously very traumatic for our country, but also a very big hit to our business. And it was at that point that I decided to move over from finance into operations, kind of take all those skills, financial skills and P&Ls and all that, and bring it out of accounting and bring it into the operation for SmartCart. And then I took the big risk of moving to operations. And it was at that point that my growth as a person and in business really took off. And I worked for about 10 years in operations, culminating, making it to the VP of Ops position at SmartCart. And then I really wanted to run a business, and I got the opportunity. I got recruited to run the business for Viking Engineering, which at the time was owned by a single owner, family owner, call it. And I was brought into Viking to run the business for him. Ultimately becoming, I was brought in as the CFO. I think kind of to bring me in at the top level and learn the finances, run the finances first. Ultimately, the plan was for me to succeed him as president and CEO, and that's what happened. And it's in that chair, not only did I kind of cut my teeth and learn how to be a president and CEO, we were selling to mostly family businesses, and they wanted to buy and meet the owner when buying big pieces of expensive equipment. So I really kind of dug in and learned the sales side of the business as well. And then started, doing all the things of implementing, becoming professional sales staff and doing things in the business. So I'm really fortunate, but I've got like a third of my life in finance and accounting, a third in operations, and then a third pretty heavy sales stuff. So I've got a nice blended background, I guess. But yeah, that was my route to eventually becoming president and CEO of a manufacturing company called Viking Engineering.
Well, it's a pretty amazing career path and trajectory. So, thank you for sharing. And you brought up a name for our listeners out there. Kurt is from Minnesota, and Brent and I are also from Minnesota. And SmartCart, correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt, but they're a Minnesota-based company out of White Bear Lake, and that was our hometown. So it does certainly means a little bit to us coming from White Bear Lake, Minnesota. What a small world. But
Yeah, amazing. It was started by an engineer in his garage, right? He just was traveling and went through the airports and thought there's got to be a better way to move your luggage through the airport. And
yeah,
in his garage in the neighborhood in White Bear Lake, he developed the first luggage cart. And fast forward, um, you know, Smart Cart became the world's leading supplier of luggage carts. It's a pretty amazing story.
yeah, Jim Molnar was his name.
Yes, Jim Mulner.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, what a story. Yeah, and then he had that for those of you he had an old it was a grocery store over on the south side of White Bear Lake, I think, that he ended up starting the company, and then they went over on White Bear Parkway. So, well, I'll get off the rails here, and we'll start talking about White Bear and Go Bears, right? And
Yeah,
we've got to
exactly.
talk about EOS, but now that you're doing EOS, um how did those different positions, you like you mentioned earlier, you sat in a lot of different chairs. You were operations, you were sales, you ran the company. How did having those different positions, shape you as a leader?
Well, I think it make helped me with decision making, no doubt, because I was able to kind of quickly take into consideration all perspectives. There's always the financial perspective. That's kind of where I go first. It's my background. If I'm making a decision, is it profitable? But then, can we get it done operationally? What does it mean for our staff? And then how do we sell it? Um, so I think I was able to make better decisions. It helped with that, but I think it helped me relate to my leaders really well. And I could help coach them, but I could also see where, the gray areas between the handoffs between departments and the collaboration was working or not working. I think it helped me work with my leadership staff as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. And let me step back for those of you that are joining us today. We are going to talk about Kurt's got an EOS shirt on, and for those of that you don't know, is EOS is called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and most people know it by the book that's called Traction. And Gino Wickman, and I've got it here. Gino Wickman is the author, so I probably forgot to talk about that early on. But where we're going with this is we are going to talk about how EOS has helped our business. And as I mentioned earlier, Kurt is now an official EOS. Uh, I think your title is Professional EOS Implementer. So
Mhm.
again, so thanks for joining us. Moving on. The CEO is a pretty big spot, right? And Viking was a pretty big outfit. Certainly nationally recognized. What do people misunderstand about being a CEO? And what did you learn by being in that role?
Um, well, I mean, all sorts of things. What did they
It's been,
maybe misunderstand?
yeah,
I think so on the positive side, I think people, and certainly maybe I didn't know until I got to this spot, maybe didn't understand the opportunity you have to make a really positive impact in people's lives, right, of your organization. And boy, I hope, and then on my good days, I was able to positively interact with people, and the impact you can have from that position and the opportunity you get is amazing. And I think maybe something that maybe misunderstood or not known is yeah, it's lonely at the top. There's no doubt about that. It can be really lonely. Maybe you see the glamour behind the position, but there's a lot of stress, a lot of responsibility kind of comes with the territory. But yeah, you're given a lot of opportunity to impact people's lives. And I think that's pretty amazing.
yeah, and you can obviously create the culture, and it's stressful certainly if there are investors, right, that want a return on that investment. But you mentioned, when I was doing research for this and looking at your LinkedIn profile, and we've had some conversations off camera. You really had said, and we're transitioning to EOS, but you had said, by bringing in EOS, it's lonely at the top, right? So you had brought in EOS to, I don't know if save is the right word. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but save or maybe transform the business. Take us back a little bit on what was going on in the business and what was happening in the business that you decided to take EOS, or maybe just said, hey, what we're doing may not work. We've got to bring in some structure. Why don't you walk us through that?
Sure. So when I was recruited to help run Viking, I would say it kind of went through what I would call a turnaround. And when I arrived, they had started using EOS, but I would say at that time, I wouldn't say we were necessarily inside the company using it as pure as we should have. Um, and there's an expression that I now know as an implementer is the implementer is going to meet the company where they are, right? And every company kind of is starting at their spot, right? They may have a solid leadership team that's doing really well, but they're trying to grow, or they may come with a brand new leadership team, or they don't even have it filled out yet, and they're still trying to complete all the pieces. So when I got there, we were just coming out of the turnaround, and I would say we had a lot of new leaders, new young leaders. So yeah, like our culture was not where we wanted it to be, clearly. But the owner had turned around the business, and we were starting to move in the right direction. So when I got there, I saw where the culture was. I saw that we had probably a lot of young leaders, maybe not in the right seat at the time. We were giving new leaders opportunities, but really diving in, working hard with our professional implementer from EOS, and starting to run the system on the, purely, like really following and working EOS in between the sessions. Over time, we were able to build a strong culture. We started solving a lot of our problems at the root cause instead of kicking things down at the curb. And eventually we tripled the business. So I really
Wow.
started to see the impact that EOS could have. And I remember as a new president too, it just helped me get my arms around the business. And it was super helpful. And yeah, so it was definitely great for our business.
Yeah, you had mentioned that you were at a point in the business where you weren't sure whether or not to implement on your own or hire an outside implementer. And you shared a story offline a little bit about that, how an analogy. And yeah, I had somebody mention to me once that EOS is simple but not easy, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
simple when you read the book, right, but not easy to implement. And you shared an analogy yesterday about going to the gym. You go ahead and share that because I thought that was pretty enlightening, and I thought it was a great story that will maybe resonate with some folks here.
Yeah. So the story that I was talking about is we hired an implementer, but there were times when maybe things got really financially challenging, and we tried to do self-implementing for a few quarters or something. And I remember just struggling with that. And the analogy I use is it's sort of like when I go to the gym. And when I have a professional instructor there that I'm working with, I'm doing my core work. I'm stretching. I'm going to get the cardio in, and I'm going to do all the things I'm supposed to do to help me grow and get better. Right. And as soon as I start taking over and I start doing the Kurt exercise program and the trainer's there, well, I think I stretched last night at golf. So then I just kind of skip that, and I don't really like core stuff. So I kind of get right into working on doing the lifting stuff, which is what I like to do. And I just don't quite do everything that I should, because as humans, we tend to do where we have success and what we like. We don't always want to go to the danger or the hard areas. And that's what it was for, like that for us. Like when we would go without an implementer, we were moving, but we weren't getting everything done in a pure fashion, necessarily doing all the hard stuff.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We implemented EOS here, and one of the biggest things that we've learned is our employees really, really like it, right? They like the structure, and sometimes you hear the term micromanage, and I don't feel that EOS is a micromanagement system. I think it's just great structure that allows you to keep everybody on track and hold each other accountable. Talk a little bit about that on the impact that it had, on the employees when you guys actually brought in that outside implementer and what changed internally. And then, 3x growth in revenue. directly tied to your EOS implementation. Obviously, a lot of components go into it, but talk a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, I think the first part you were sort of alluding to a topic maybe about accountability and micromanagement. And the way I see it, and EOS sees it like accountability is about the outcome, holding people to a target or to an outcome. And sometimes micromanagement, people are thinking about the process to do it. And I think, EOS tends to focus on accountability, getting everybody responsible for a number, getting everybody in the organization rowing in the same direction, trying to help hit the numbers. There are times when there are processes that need to be done the right and best way every time in order to create consistency and scalability in a business. There are certainly times when there are, key processes that have to be done the best and right way. But I would say, generally speaking, EOS is holding you more accountable to results, not micromanaging the process by which you may do things. So that's where I see that topic. But yeah, the people, once you start following it pure and, the old adage of doing what you say, and really starting to making sure that you have the right people in right seats. And there's nothing more important to me than that. Nothing can kill your momentum when it comes to profitability or kill your culture is when you didn't have right people in right seats. And I think that's when people starting to see that at the leadership team level, we held each other accountable, and we had people in the wrong seats, and the people underneath knew it, right? They always know when the leader's not in the right spot. They may be technically strong, but they're just not good at LMA, which we call LMA, lead, manage, hold people accountable. They're just not in the right seat. And once we started, I'd say we had to make a couple leadership team changes. The rest of the organization saw, wow, they're serious about this. And we brought somebody in, that had experience managing people and knowing how to manage people the right way and help, manage, eliminate roadblocks and help their people have success. I mean, the people started to then see, oh, they're serious about this, and they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Right. And that got a ton of buy-in throughout the organization. And then anytime you start sharing the vision down into the grounds of the organization, that's when people really feel first that they have to see it, understand it, and then, kind of want to be a part of it and internalize that vision. That's when you get, that's when the magic starts happening. People start working with the vision because now they're included. And so that's where accountability, it's great to have accountability, but if you're not sharing the vision and sharing that, it's hard to have one. You need to do both, right? And so it created some really good buy-in and accountability in the organization.
Do you find that the leaders that are on the top have a harder time admitting that they're maybe not in the right seat? Is that any more challenging than somebody underneath them?
I would say that's a pretty accurate statement. I think people generally want to do well and have a lot of pride. And it's hard to admit that, yeah, I'm not so good at this seat. I'm much better over here. And because I think generally people want to gravitate towards management, and maybe that's not where, that's not the best seat for you. That's not where you're becoming an A player. I see it sometimes in sales, right? Gravitate towards sales management, and that's your best salesperson, and they should be out there selling. They're not great at managing people. So yeah, there's a challenge for that, because I think there's a general pressure to move up the ranks, move up the ladder. And that can be seen as, well, I'm not in management, I'm below management, but some of the most important people in your organization are not in management. Right. So I think there's just maybe a culture pressure with that. And
yeah, John and I have realized that when you move somebody into a management higher level role and they get used to doing that, and then you ask them to do tasks that used to be what they did before, sometimes that's challenging. And you touched on that they do like it. They like the management, and they don't like the blocking and tackling anymore, right? But how do you know for sure that that's the right fit for them? And that's sometimes a pretty tough decision to make.
Yeah, I mean that's you have the people analyzers you're reviewing. Are they hitting their numbers? How is their team responding to them? Um, yeah, I mean the tools are there within EOS to help. You know, the tools are there to bring the information and make it crystal clear on what's happening. So
And you talk about the tools, EOS. Why don't we talk a little bit about, what is EOS and, why you decided to get into it, right? So you left Viking and you decided to go into this thing called EOS. For an audience that doesn't really understand EOS or the entrepreneurial operating system or the book Traction, what is it from a high level overview? And maybe walk us through what that looks like if someone was interested in learning more about that. And for those of you listening, we are certainly going to put Kurt's contact information, and we'll link the book down below as well.
yeah, so the EOS system it's a proven simple system with a simple set of tools that help business owners get more of what they want from their business. And what we do as professional implementers is we work with the leadership team and we help them get what we call vision traction healthy. And vision is just helping ensure that the leadership team is 100% on the same page where the company's going and how they're going to get there. Traction is just installing a discipline, focus, and accountability on the leadership team. So you know that everybody's working on that vision and then healthy is creating a cohesive, functional, open-minded, fun-loving leadership team, because oftentimes they're not, right? And then, we find that as the leadership team goes, so goes the rest of the organization. And ultimately, we work with them to get vision traction healthy throughout the entire organization. So that's what we do. And then, kind of determining if it's to help them learn more about it and determining right fit, we offer, a 90-day, we call it, 90-minute meeting. We call it the 90-minute meeting. And we would sit down and share with the owner and the ownership or the leadership team how we can help them get vision traction healthy in their business.
Yeah. So I have to ask you, how hard was the certification process when you decided, like, hey, I'm gonna go do this and be a professional implementer? Was it a fun process to go through?
Fun and challenging. Yeah, for sure. For
Define
sure. I
fun,
mean,
right?
yeah, I mean, well, so from my perspective, I ran on EOS for 11 years at Viking, right? So I had the background coming in of knowing, the benefit of running on it. And I also had the benefit as, one of my implementers, I also knew on a personal level. So sometimes I got inside baseball and I'm always a curious person. So I was always, why are we doing it this way? What does that mean? Tell me a little more about this. And they would share information to help me. So I think I had some benefit there. But yeah, I mean, you have to, one of the things I love about being an implementer is it's your job to be a pro's pro when it comes to being a coach, teacher, and facilitator. And it's a big EOS community, and it's all about, continuous learning and being the best that you can be and being able to help. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of preparation and a lot of continuous work, to be the best you can when it comes to being an implementer.
Yeah. And you brought up the word help before, and I think that is one of the core values of EOS, or at least from a strategic standpoint, they do talk a lot about, being helpful.
Right.
So
Absolutely. Help first
help first.
is a core value for sure. And that's what we're here to do. And I think a lot of implementers, they've been through the grind. They know what it's like. There's a lot of things I know. I don't look at all the gray hair I got, Jonathan, and it's nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like you're at your point where you're like, I've learned a ton. There's a lot of things I wish I knew. I wish I would have done differently. Definitely, for sure. Right. And and the feeling you get of helping somebody else is just tremendous, right?
Yeah.
And you want to take all the things that you learn, and this is a proven system. Like you guys said, it's a simple set of
Mm.
tools, proven system. And that's the beauty of it. I don't have to change anything. It's my job to teach it pure. And, you want to be able to help, small businesses and owners and leadership teams run a better business and live a better life. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. If you have time, let's get a little bit more granular on the EOS, if we can dig down a little bit and get some nuggets for our listeners. But what does EOS give an owner or the leadership team? Uh, what does that give them that they often don't have before they start EOS? Right. So if you're not running on EOS, you were at Viking running EOS for 11 years, but if there's a company that, fits your avatar, and I think it's a minimum of, 10 employees, but someone over 10 employees and there's a leadership team, what does EOS give them that they may not have today? I know you've talked about accountability, so I think that would probably be, one thing, but is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, when you say vision, traction, healthy vision is generally speaking about alignment, right? Getting everybody aligned in the organization, rowing in the same direction. You mentioned traction is about discipline, focusing,
Yeah.
accountability, and then team health is super important, right?
Right.
Um, that's at the high level, and then we work with them. And I don't want to give too much of the sauce. The 90-minute really, it does it. That's where you get that's where you get the entire package, explains to you, and it makes a lot more sense, the entire process. But yeah, we work with them on strengthening 6 key components around their business.
Okay.
And like I said, your challenges, impurities, imperfections, as well as some opportunities, ideas really become transparent once you start strengthening those 6 key components of your business.
Okay. And again, we'll certainly put your contact information down below. People will be able to click on that link and contact you. So, well, thanks for sharing. I have, just a few more, one of the questions I want to know is, you've been in business, you've had all these really cool various roles, you know, and there's a lot of good companies, right? Viking was a really good company, and then a lot of the companies that you're working with, they're really good companies. But why would you, or what would you say, um, why do companies get stuck? Where they hit a plateau, and we're working with a lot of companies that aren't using traction, but they get stuck at a certain revenue, and then they can't blow through that. So if you have any insight to that, I'd be great to hear it with your 35 years of business experience.
Well, I mean, thank you for that. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of reasons. Sometimes we refer to that as hitting the ceiling.
Yeah.
And there can be a lot of reasons. I mean, I think sometimes the adage is what got you here won't get you there, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes the desire to grow can create complexity that either the structure can't support or the people can't support. Um, that can happen, right? Sometimes a business is trying to do too many things and they really need to simplify to grow and do better. Sometimes they need to create better systems. Maybe they're producing products, but it takes them 9 months to get it out the door, and the quality isn't there all the time. Maybe they have to, do a better job with systems, right? So they can get the product out quality. Sometimes the leadership team can become the bottleneck. And, in the first stage of growth, you expand a little bit. Now all the decisions are running through 7 key people, and they just become the bottleneck, and they need to get better at delegating and elevating, right? It could be processes. Sometimes you got to streamline your processes and make sure that everybody in the business is following the process. That creates consistency and scalability. There's different things that we teach and work with leadership teams to help them break through the ceiling when they encounter it in their business. But yeah, there's a lot of things that can happen. And sometimes you're in a business and you sell product and you need to develop a new product, and you
Yeah.
may have competition that comes into play. But we do work with leadership teams on improving skills and abilities to help them break through the ceiling. But good question.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we just spent 3 days in Miami for training, and one of our takeaways on our roadmap implementation is Brett and I have to become better leaders, right? We've operated one way for so many years, and it's like we're really trying to do a lot of self-reflecting and realized, where we're at as an organization is for us to take the next step, we've got to become better leaders. So I can appreciate that is, we've got to look in the mirror because I brought up Harry Truman yesterday in a conversation. And for those of you who don't know, Harry Truman was one of the presidents of the U.S. He was a Midwest guy, and he had a plaque on his desk that said, the buck stops here. Just kind of an,
Oh
the
yeah.
buck stops here, right? So we've got to take responsibility, and one of the things that we like to talk about here, and is being radically open minded. Don't be stubborn, right? Try to be, and that was something I picked up from Ray Dalio, who was a famous investor here in the United States. But he was like, you just got to be radically open minded and don't think you know it all. So, I think, and what's nice about you is if someone decides to spend the money on EOS, I think they're taking that step because they are open minded and realize to get to the next level, they've got to break some things. So.
Yeah, and I think it's, that's a great point. I mean, being open-minded, getting different perspectives, and the world is changing so quick nowadays, right? We could the AI subject and everything else, but how you lead and how businesses are competing and everything's changing really fast. So definitely what got you where you are isn't going to get you help you grow going forward. You have to be open to change and if you're going to people have processes in their business, right? You have a process for everything you do, HR process, marketing process, whatever. Do you have a process to run your business? Um, that's the question I like. Do you have a process to run your business? Because that's really what you're investing in when you invest in EOS, a process to help you run your business.
One of the things that we use with EOS is, issue resolution, right? Identifying issues and problems. And, share with us, the reason with your experience why, leadership groups talk about the same problems over and over again and never solve them. And then maybe how some components of EOS might get them, over the finish line per se.
Oh, good question. Yeah, I think generally speaking, leadership teams come together with pure hearts and their desire to solve the issue, right? But they spend all their time discussing the issue, right? They discuss the daylights out of the issue. You may get some people back and forth on they've got the solution, you got this, start politicking and repeating themselves, and sometimes the loudest person wins, and they're just discussing the daylights, but like typically they don't walk out of there with somebody making a decision, taking an action plan to go solve it. But even more importantly, a symptom was written down and they didn't really identify the issue at the root cause. I mean, I can attest to doing this often in our struggles with young leaders. It's like it was just the symptom that we were listing. We didn't dig down deep into the organization and really get the root cause and identify the root cause of the issue. And then somebody takes something, a plan of action and a responsibility to end it and make it go away forever. I think we just would treat symptoms and then it would come back, 3 months later, and it would be like, didn't we just discuss this, and then sometimes they don't solve it because they're willing to sometimes live with the short-term pain than maybe the solution, it's a long solution. Sometimes documentation isn't viewed as profitable right away, and it's a long grinding solution. Um, it's necessary, but sometimes that gets kicked to the curb. But oftentimes they just don't identify the root cause of the issue.
Yeah, thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. We've talked about accountability and micromanagement already, and in EOS there's a component of accountability, and I would say less from a micromanagement. But can you explain the differences in those two a little bit, and what they mean to you from a management perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on this a little bit with accountability being more about outcomes. And I think when people talk about micromanaging, they're talking about process and having somebody over your shoulder tell you exactly what to do all the time, right? And ideally, you are sharing vision with people, so everybody feels part of the vision, and then everybody's responsible for. In EOS, we use a scorecard for teams, gives you the 5 to 15 key numbers that helps you keep a pulse on your business, and then everybody in the organization gets a measurable, so a number that you're accountable for hitting, right? And that makes people feel part of a team. You're all contributing and driving towards a measurable or number. So you're part of the big organization. It's not just the leadership team that's out there with a scorecard or a measurable, right? And I think that creates a sense of belonging, partnership, and buy-in that goes along with that accountability. I think I talk about if you share the vision, you're more likely to get buy-in and people to hold themselves accountable, helping you drive the vision. So that's how I see, accountability happening in EOS.
Thank you for sharing that, Kurt. This has been a lot of fun. Are you having fun?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk EOS all day. I'm surprised. I'm surprised. I don't think I've used a sports analogy yet, and I'm like, I thought for sure with the three of us, we would
Yeah.
have sports analogies going on like crazy. 'Cause I think one time you asked me, you go, because I was thinking about this, and you go, well, what has to happen at a company for them to need EOS? And it's like, well, I thought about that, and I'm like, I got
Yeah.
a great sports analogy for that one. So it's like, okay, well. I think it's for every business that's between 10 and 250 employees, but I'm obviously biased. But
Right.
in my mind, you can be 10-0, 8-2, 5-5, or 2-8. You need a process to run your business, and you should be on EOS. Because you never know if you're 2-8, you think, well, I want to get to 5-5 to get right, so I'll invest in the process, right? That's going to help my business, help me grow, help
Yep.
me. But if you're 10-0, what if you're winning all your games by a field goal? Do you think the team that's 8-2 is going to sit down in the off season and not try to beat you next year? Not, your competition's not trying to get 10-0. So you've got to be, maybe you're 10-0, but you're not taking advantages of all the opportunities and things that you can do. And maybe you should be winning by a touchdown or 10 points. So I had someone saying, well, do you have to be broken? And it's like, you don't have to be broken to get the benefits of EOS. So I had to inject my first sports analogy today.
Yeah, no,
Although we got in the one with the gym. That was okay.
That's great. And it resonates well with all our Minnesota teams, right?
Right.
I like
sure.
the fact that you sit idle in the off season because there's a couple teams in Minnesota that continuously do that.
Oh boy,
Yeah,
we're getting dangerously off the tracks. Yeah, we
So
love
question
sports.
on, investing in EOS, right? There's a time commitment, there's a financial commitment. And ultimately it's not and John and I talk about this all the time. It's not about making people feel happy and feel good about themselves. We want them to make more money, right? You talked about scaling Viking 3x, right? As the company grows, does the owner need to change? What has to change at the top as a company continues to grow? Is it important for the owner to change along the way? Talk a little bit about that if you could.
And then if I can just add something to that, Brent, because I think we struggle with that, and I know a lot of the people that we work with struggle like that. A lot of the companies that we work with, we're a marketing agency and we focus on the home service businesses. And a lot of our clients are owner operators that own these landscape, irrigation, tree service companies, right? And they have a hard time getting out of their own way because they think they can do it better than everyone else. And I think, Brent, we struggle with that a little bit too. It's like, well, hell, I'd be better off doing it ourselves, right? When if you give it to someone else, maybe they can do it to 70% or 80% of what we can. But I think that's a struggle that we need to work on as well. And we've talked about that. And we see it a lot with our owner operators too. A lot of times these owner operators are in the field as well, and they can't get out of their own way and build out their crews and their teams like that. So I didn't mean to jump on that, but I wanted to add that into that question for Kurt, because I think it's a really important question, is how do we get out of our own way, I think is what you're asking.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think, it bring I think of the story of, the hiker that falls off the cliff, right? And he grabs the vine and he's dangling and he can't go up and he can't go down. And he looks up and says, "Is there anybody to help me?" And there's, this booming voice that says, "Do you trust me?" And they say, "Oh yeah, I trust you." And it says, "Okay, well, let go of the vine," right? And the hiker looks around, he looks back up and he goes, "Is anybody else up there?" Because
Yeah.
it's hard to
Yeah.
let go of the vine, right? So, um, I mean, that's ultimately, yeah, at the time, you probably do the job better than anybody can. But if you want to grow and scale, and especially for that, or someday sell and have a succession plan, you are going to have to teach people to do what you do and bring people around you and build out a team to be able to do that because you can't scale it. You won't have the capacity to do it. Um, and that's just the challenge of going from, the 1 to 3, 5 person gig to company, and to grow, you have to do those type things. And it's hard to let go of the vine. I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and we're going through, like, he knows EOS, and he starts bringing out the accountability chart, and he's like in 4 of the seats, and every time he writes his name down, he looks at me, he's just waiting for me to say something, and I don't even need to say anything, because he starts, and he just completes the sentence for me. He goes, "And I'm in too many seats." And I'm like, we start going through it, and I said, "How's this working for you? How do you think you're going to grow your business? Do you think you can stay in all these seats and triple your business like you want? How's that going to work?" It's
Yeah.
like, no, they know the answer, but you kind of just have to, our job is just use the tools, walk them through the exercise, and say, ultimately, what are you going to do? But you need to make a decision. You're either going to stay this way forever, or we need to start building out your leadership team, and you're going to have to put in controls, and you're going to have to let go of the vine. But I completely understand how difficult it is.
It's not easy, and one thing that you just did there that I really enjoyed is you how you role played asking them questions, and because they know the answer, so you're just facilitating and getting the answers, and then you can use what they're. Hey, you just told me that you can't do it based on the questions I just asked you, right? So I love the questioning aspect of it. We read a book, Brent, and we just saw him speak. For those of you out there, it's called Marcus Sheridan is the author. You ask, they answer, I believe is the name of the book. Marcus Sheridan, they ask, you answer. Fantastic speaker. And his whole premise is just asking questions, asking questions, asking questions. So I can appreciate the question asking your friend that you're helping out there, and it's like they know the answer, and if they don't know
Yeah.
the answer, it's like, hey, what would well, how would you solve that problem? Because I think as business owners and leaders, right, you want to solve the problem for them. It's like, well, here's what I would do, and you got to go do this, and you go down to the mailroom and you do this, and it's like, well, what would you do? How would you solve that problem? So I can
Yeah,
appreciate that.
that's a great point. I mean, we're teachers, facilitators, and coaches. We will coach and challenge, but support. But it's not my job to make decisions for them. I ask the questions. If they ask, I may share some experiences that I've had, right? So, but otherwise, the like you said, the answer's in the room, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Especially if they have the right people, but like the answer's in the room. You're just going through a process to make things super transparent, and it's there for them to solve.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, a few more questions and we'll wrap up. I'm grateful for your time. I think we've got some absolute great content. I love talking about EOS and really helping our listeners out. So again, thank you for jumping on. A couple closing questions. What would you say is the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned, or a couple of lessons that you've learned in your successful 35 plus year career?
Um, I would have to say I had some really good leaders ahead of me, and I think sometimes early on I would try to maybe emulate those leaders. and be maybe more of them, because I was like, well, this person was so great. And I tried to be them, and then eventually someone came to me and says, Kurt, in order for you to be the best you and serve your customers the best, the people that work with you and for you the best, is you have to be the authentic you. Like, you have to be you. That is how you are going to create the best relationships. Be authentic, be open and honest, like, be the best you, but be you. Don't try to emulate somebody else, even if they were, a mentor of yours or good. Like, you have to be you. And that's the only real way you'll be authentic and create connections and trust with people. That was like outstanding advice. And at the same time, it was sort of a relief. Like, we just get to be the guys from White Bear, North. So we just get to be who we are, and being, authentic and honest is the best management advice that I received.
I absolutely love that one. And I don't want to speak for Brent, but, we always say, hey, what you see is what you get with us too. And it's like, we wear it right here. And we wear our emotions on our sleeve. Not Brent so much, but I'm more of the animated one. But what you see is what you get, right? Brent is not gonna be on the podcast and be all animated, right? That's not his personality. And I think that's why we make a good team. And it's certainly a lot easier being yourself, right? If you
100%.
it's hard to emulate other people. And it like you said, and I really like what you said as far as the authentic you, be the authentic you. So that's a great nugget.
That definitely ties into marketing strategy as well, John, right? We always talk about that with our clients. You just want to create authentic content and have an authentic brand, and don't try to be somebody else, right? Create your brand and just run with it. And if people like it, great. If they don't, they're probably not the ideal customer for you. So move on to somebody else. But that was a great share, Kurt. We appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I think I don't have anything else. I'm grateful to have you on. And for those of you, if it's your first listen with Built to Win, our podcast, as I mentioned earlier, we want to talk about marketing, sales, faith, building a life that matters. And we're grateful to have Kurt on to talk about EOS and how to build a better company, to help business owners fulfill their why, right? So think about what your why is and potentially how you could incorporate maybe EOS into your business. It's been great for us. So in closing, I think, we always part of our podcast, as I mentioned, is talking about faith. I've got a scripture I'd like to share today, and then I'll turn it over to Kurt, that I think is relevant to what we've talked today about. And it's really about surrounding yourself with talented people. You can't go at this alone. I've been lucky to have a business partner for 30 years, and I can't imagine, we built Digital Planet up and had a successful exit, and we're enjoying doing it again with our company, JBX Strategies. And it sure is a lot more fun doing this with other people and surrounding yourself with talented leadership teams and building those out. So Proverbs, I'll get back to it. I think it's 15:22, and I don't have my reading glasses with me, but it says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. With many advisors, they succeed. So don't be afraid to bring people in that you think can help your business out. And Kurt, do you have a favorite scripture? I know you're a man of faith and it's important to you. Do you have anything you'd like to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite is, as well, I know we both go to Eagle Brook, right? We're EBC guys. But I often, and Bob Merritt's my guy, right? So he's my favorite. No, I love the other guys, but I think he's the original for me and my favorite. But, he talks a lot about dealing with it, that adversity is part of life, and you will see adversity in your life, and it helps build your character. That's where the real growth comes from. And then the verse that sticks with me whenever I am going through adversity is Philippians 4:13, and that's just, hey, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I'm not I don't do a ton of Bible verses every day, but I do some things in the morning, and that's the thing I say to myself because, to expect adversity today, but just know that's just part of growth, and then that you can persevere and will be better for it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I appreciate that. And for those of you out there, if you're struggling in business or life and you do have adversity, like Kurt talked about, and you think you don't have anyone to talk to, certainly reach out to us. You've got the big man upstairs. If you have any questions on scripture or anything like that, feel free to reach out to myself or Brent. But you are not alone in your journey. And Kurt, grateful to have you on. It's been great to catch up after all these years, and super excited that you could join Built to Win. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me today. It was a great time.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. Appreciate it. Awesome job.
Thanks, Brent.